Hello everyone, Mary Rose here at Stitch Bliss Corner, and today I'm going to cover Vincent van Gogh, Maestro of the brush. And I think what's particularly special about Vincent is that so many people can identify with him, with his inner struggles, his outer struggles, his problems with his family, the friends he alienated, you know, to the point where you don't really know if they were friends at all to him. He had difficulty with relationships, and that was just how he was made. You know, he didn't set out to be that way. It's just the way he was made. And I have decided to honour him today with his favourite yellow. This blue I'm sure he would approve of, and it's a little bit Japanese looking. And these are the Starry Night earrings that my daughter got me some earrings. She got me 3 different sets, and I chose these for his video today. So let's crack on. Now, I have a timeline here that I'm going to go through just to give you an outline of his life, because I think once you know about his life, his paintings make more sense. So I'm just going to take 5 minutes or so to go through that. But I thought I would just start with showing you a picture of his family tree we have here. And they're the people. I'll show you those again in a minute. His mother and father and his sisters and brothers. But Harlequin has gone to the trouble of printing out a family tree. And for those who are visual learners, here is the Van Gogh family tree, which I'm trying to get it all into the shot. But as you can see, Vincent's father, Theodorus, you'll see 2 Vincent van Goghs there. This one here was the older brother of Vincent, and he was stillborn. And so when Vincent was born, about a year after the death of this child, they gave him the same name, and which wasn't unusual in those days. Then we have, sorry, I'm not great with family trees. Then his brother Theo there, he was a younger brother. Now it says Theo, but actually it's pronounced Theo apparently. But I'll show you the pictures now because I get mixed up with family trees. So we have Theodorus, Anna, his wife, and then here are the children. So we have Vincent, Theo, Anna, Elizabeth, Guillaume, and Cornel, or Cor. They called him Cor for short. So there we are. Sorry, that's Cor there. So there's the family anyway. Now, I'll just go through now. Vincent Wilhelm van Gogh, born March 30th, 1853 in Zundert. Now, I have to apologise particularly to Ingeborg for my pronunciation of anything Dutch, and also to anyone from France, or, you know, I just can't pronounce foreign languages at all. So I do apologise for that at the outset. So it's a village in the southern province of North Brabant. A year after the birth of his stillborn brother Vincent. As I said, he had the same name. His father was Reverend Theodorus van Gogh, and his mother's first name was Anna. Then the three sisters, Elizabeth, Anna, and Wilhelmina, and two brothers, Theo and Cornels, or Cor for short. It was said he was a quiet child, a loner, but it would have been a secure and safe one for a child. He attended the village school in Zundert, and he was sent to boarding school in Zevenbergen, but he loathed it. He lasted 2 years. He just was very annoyed with his parents for doing that. But this was something that people with money, they used to do that. They used to send their children to boarding school. I mean, Winston Churchill was another one. He was sent at a very young age to boarding school, and he absolutely hated it, but it was what you did. Anyway, he attended for 18 months at a high school. He lasted 2 years at the boarding school, and then he attended another school in Tilburg for 18 months. When he was 16, he began working at Goupil and C, which was an art dealer's business in The Hague. This was a family connections post because his uncle, Vincent, that's another Vincent, was a partner. Theo later worked for the same firm. In 1873, Goupils transferred Vincent to London, and he got quite influenced there by Charles Dickens, and he was a big reader, Vincent, a lot of the classics and everything. He was very good with writing. He wrote his words down better than when he spoke to people. I think sometimes it's like that, isn't it? When some people who are a little bit quiet or retiring, they have trouble speaking to someone face to face. But if you sat them down to write a letter to that person, they could write, and they could think about what they were writing. They could write quite well. And Vincent was one of those people. Let's see. 2 years later, he came back to Paris. He was fired from the dealership. And part of that was because he became quite expert, of course, in painting. And so people who came in, if they wanted to buy a particular painting, instead of sort of taking the commission and being very glad of it, he used to sort of say, well, that's not much of a painting, and sort of talk them out of it. So anyway, so then he immersed himself in religion. He went back to England to be an assistant teacher and returned to the Netherlands at the end of the year. When he was over in London, he did try a bit of lay preaching and everything as well. And he decided to emulate his father by becoming a clergyman. His parents paid for him to be privately tutored to pass entry for university. But Vincent wanted to be an evangelist and headed to the Borinage coal mining region in Belgium. So I think once he decided to do something, he was a bit impatient to get started. And I think he saw his father's version of religion as being quite stultifying and full of, convention and tradition and ceremony and all that sort of thing. And he was more probably how he imagined Jesus to have been, to cast off all your worldly possessions and walk among the needy and preach amongst those sort of people. So he headed to this very oppressed area and depressed area in Belgium. His ministry was among the mining families, and he chose to live among them. In 1897, his appointment was not renewed. Now, what happened? They called him the Christ of the coalfields, because he sort of chose, like the people who put him there, the evangelists that put him there, they sort of were willing to pay for him to live in a reasonable digs, reasonable place, room and everything. But he chose to give that to someone else, and he decided to sleep on the bare boards and give his bed to someone else. And he used to draw sketches, I've got some of those here, of the various miners and everything, and their families, their wives and everything. And in order to help with their warmth in winter, he just burnt a lot of the sketches, as you know, to start the fire off, to start the wood burning and everything. So I think he seems to be a bit of an extreme person. He would go to the extreme of poverty, and probably some of the miners couldn't understand him. They might have seen him as a little bit patronizing, because they would have known that he came from an upper class family, and here he was amongst them, you know, denying himself things that they would probably have thought, well, if I was in his shoes, I certainly wouldn't be here. I'd be back in Paris, you know, knocking back the cocktails and chasing all the women, you know. You know, they probably, a lot of them didn't understand where he was coming from, and some of them would have ridiculed him as well. And of course his parents were probably horrified that he, you know, didn't seem to be getting anywhere in the world. They wanted him to find some kind of future for himself. So anyway, let's see where we are here. Now, his parents were concerned about his drifting, and his father considered having him admitted to an asylum. Well, see, that's another thing they used to do in those days. If you chose to not do what your parents wanted you to do, and you were a little bit unusual, shall we say, radical. I mean, his parents would have seen him as you know, like a goth or something. The equivalent in this day and age, you know, walking around with a safety pin through his nose. You know, that kind of concern about how it reflected on the family. And so, you know, families with means in those days, if you didn't toe the line, it was relatively easy to have you committed somewhere, and you were never seen again. So anyway, oh, that might be a bit extreme, but you know what I mean. Now let's see where we are here. I know his brother convinced him to start expressing himself artistically. You've probably seen some of these drawings, because Vincent used to write letters to Theo, and he would have sent him little sketches of some of these people. And he developed rapidly from simple drawings to painting. He went to Brussels to study art at the Academy, but left after 9 months. In 1881, he went to live with his parents again in Leighton in North Brabant. He learnt to draw with all sorts of drawing materials, and he learned like a draftsman. So when you're a draftsman and you're learning to draw, you do gridding, just like cross stitches, and you would fit your drawing according to which square that particular piece fitted into. So if you were drawing, say, a circle, you'd have all your square grids, and you'd know where the curves were, which helped to train the eye. And I think he very much appreciated that kind of learning. He learned perspective, anatomy, and physiognomy. He mostly drew peasants. At the end of 1881, he moved to The Hague and continued to draw under the tutelage of Anton Mauve, Mauve, that was his cousin by marriage. They parted after a falling out over Vincent's relationship with a pregnant prostitute who already had a child. Her name was Sien, or Sien. And that absolutely outraged not only his cousin, but I don't think Theo was too happy about it either. And that caused quite a bit of trouble in the family. And eventually Vincent did break off the relationship in 1883. Then he moved again back with his parents, who now lived in Nuenen, Nuenen. And there Vincent began painting and was influenced by Millet, and I've got some picture here of Millet, who was famous for depicting the harsh life of peasants. Now, what was I going to say there? Oh yes, no, even when he moved back with his parents, they actually put him, there was a room at the back that they gave him for a studio. And so it was very convenient that it was at the back of the house somewhere where he was tucked away. But I mean, you can't be too judgmental of his parents, of course, because they had a certain level to maintain a level in society. His father was a minister, so you know he had to be the height of respectability, and it must have been very inconvenient for this son to be wandering in and out dressed. It could, because Vincent used to dress like a peasant. You know, he used to have the straw hat and the rustic shirt on, and the sandals and all the rest of it, and that's just the way he was. Anyway, so he worked very hard on his art, and in 1884 he rented rooms for his studio. At the end of 1884 he began preparation for the Potato Eaters. He did many studies of the heads of peasants for the painting, and Potato Eaters was completed in 1885. In the summer of 1885 he did a large number of drawings of peasants working in the fields, but the local priest told his parishioners to stop posing for Vincent, so he ran out of models. I wonder who influenced the local priest to do that. He turned to painting landscapes. Later in 1885 he enrolled at the Academy in Antwerp, where he was inspired by Rubens and Japanese prints. In 1886 he went to Paris and lived with his brother. Apparently it basically told his brother that he was keen to live in Paris for a while and just turned up. So then his brother had to accommodate him in his Paris flat, and that was for about 2 years. So there's not a lot known about that time, because most of the things known about Vincent are through his letters to his brother. Theo kept all of the letters that Vincent sent to him, but Vincent didn't keep Theo's letters, maybe one or two, but he didn't keep them. Well, he's probably wandering around too much to keep them. Now, because his brother was an art dealer, Vincent came in contact with the Impressionists, Monet, Cézanne and Manet, and the post-impressionist Paul Gauguin. He abandoned his dark palette of the old Dutch masters and began to paint in brighter colours. He befriended Gauguin, Émile Bernard, Paul Signac and Georges Seurat, and he was the one that was the pointillist. He began to experiment with different styles and formed his own unique one. To develop further as an artist, he moved to Arles, A-R-L-E-S. He was very busy producing paintings. That's sort of in the Provence region. He was very busy producing paintings. He wanted to build a collection to be presented at an art exhibition. His dream was to collect about 30 paintings and have an exhibition and take the art world by storm, basically. And then all the money that his brother was putting forward to support Vincent with his work and his rent and everything. I think Vincent did do odd jobs here and there, but basically he was being supported by his brother, his younger brother. Now, his big dream, because he was interested in Japanese art, Vincent's great dream, because Japanese, apparently during that time in Japan, artists would get together and go up the side of a mountain, basically, build a hut, or if there was a hut there already, they would all live together and they would produce works of art together. And Vincent thought that was a great idea. So he wanted to do the same thing. So anyway, he rented a place in Arles called the Yellow House, which I'll show you all this very shortly. He wanted other artists to come to Arles to join him and all work together as a group. Now, Gauguin arrived in Arles in 1888 to keep him company. And basically, Gauguin, he had about 5 children and a wife. And he was, I think he wasn't, when he married her, he wasn't an artist, put it that way. And then he decided he wanted to be one, so he basically took off. and he relied on his artworks, for money, and Tio happened to be his dealer. So Tio most likely said to him, look, would you mind going down to spend a bit of time with my brother down there? And Gauguin may have felt a little bit obligated to do so. So he went down there, and being not the most tolerant person, it probably wasn't a brilliant idea to send him down to live with Vincent. But anyway, he arrived in Arles in 1888, but then Vincent began to get ill, and he suffered a form of epilepsy that took the form of delusions and psychotic episodes. And of course he drank that absinthe, or whatever it was called, that strange drink that they all seem to like so much. And what was the other thing he did? And he smoked, of course. Anyway, so he wasn't and he didn't eat a lot, because he basically said he'd rather spend the money on paints than eating. And in the evening he might have some bread and a coffee, and that'd get him through the day and everything. It was really, whatever. Anyway, he had an altercation with Gauguin, which I shall go into a little bit more later. And Vincent cut off part of his left earlobe. He went to hospital to have his ear attended, and after that he decided that he was in trouble, so he admitted himself to an asylum. And when he was well enough, he was allowed to draw and paint. Towards the end of 1889, 2 of his paintings were shown at the exhibition of the Society of Independent Artists, and an art critic published an article in positive terms about his work. Now, he left the asylum in May 1890 and travelled to the village of Auvers, Ouvres-sur-Oise, O-I-S-E, that's the river, near Paris. He stopped off in Paris to see Tio, Joe and their baby son Vincent Willem, and that's exactly the same name as Vincent. Vincent's second name was Willem as well. A small group of admirers was forming, but Vincent had begun to despair. I feel a failure, that's it as far as I'm concerned. I feel that this is the destiny that I accept, that it will never change. And he kept working feverishly, producing dozens of paintings and drawings, and on July 1890 he died after, he shot himself in a field, and about 36 hours later that caused him to die from those injuries. So that's a quick outline of Vincent's life, and now I shall just go through and I think I will say at this stage there's a link below to a Doctor Who segment. Now it's only about just over 3 minutes, and if you don't last the distance watching this, which I wouldn't blame you, but if you don't, just have a look at that little clip. Now, for people who don't know anything about Doctor Who, it's basically about a travelling doctor, shall we say, universally travelling Time Lord, and he travels about in a phone box called the TARDIS, and it lands wherever in certain times, and then the doctor gets out with his assistant and they go on adventures. And this is just a particularly interesting one to do with Vincent, and there are some lovely touches in there. So I'm just going to mention that at this stage, and also there will be a link to Don McLean's song Vincent, which, if you haven't heard it, I mean most people have, but younger viewers might not have heard it, and it is a particularly touching song written about Vincent van Gogh. Now here's a picture of Vincent as a boy with his little lace-up boots there, and he's got a little yacht there and standing against a scene of the sea. And it says, according to the memoirs of his sister Elizabeth, noted that Vincent was a quiet, serious and sensitive child. He remained largely friendless throughout his life, preferring instead solitary pursuits such as nature watching, especially flowers, birds and insects. Like many who are eventually diagnosed with a mental illness, Vincent was known as a strange child with odd eating habits and a preference for solitude. As is very common in cases... Vincent's eccentricities are understandable, explained in hindsight, but rather frustrating and worrisome for the family. Well, you know, that's just the way it is. So I should just put that over there. Now here's a picture of him at the age of 18. And he's sort of got a brooding look. You know, he looks cranky. He looks as though he's a bit annoyed. Probably because they said, look, you've got to get your photograph taken. And under sufferance, he did so. And here's another picture. Oh, this is when he was 13. Sorry, I've got those the wrong way around. But he still doesn't look too pleased about being in front of a camera lens. And then we have a picture here of Vincent and his brother, Theo. They were so alike, weren't they? A little bit like looking into a mirror. It's really quite remarkable. So that's those two. Now we're going on to his early influences. Now here's a picture of Millet, the sewer. Now, Vincent was very much influenced by the Dutch masters. And so there's his version, and this is a drawing that Vincent did when he was, because a lot of the artists in those days, they used to copy the masters in order to perfect their drawing and their accuracy. So that's his version. The Sewer, 1881, pen and watercolour on paper. And here's a very famous picture here of The Gleaners by Millet. I can remember that being on the wall of a classroom at school. That's a very famous one. And note the colours are quite muted, and you know, those kind of dark greens and you know, that kind of palette anyway. So anyway, when Vincent decided to head off and be an evangelist, he headed to Borinage, Borinage in Belgium. It's linked to coal mining. The word Borinage itself was coined from the term Borin, which referred to the coal miners of northern France and the Mons area. The latter term now refers to the population of an area which is greener than it might seem at first sight, and on and on. Anyway, so here are his pictures. Very early drawings that he did of these people. Miners in the Snow, this one is September 1880, Eton. Pencil, chalk and watercolour on paper. And here's another one, Miners' Wives Carrying Sacks of Coal, 1882. Sketch of Miners in the Snow, 1882, watercolour, pen and ink. Now, he decided to, he got the sack basically from there. So then he went travelling around the place. And here he is, the beach at Scheveningen in stormy weather. He decided to do this, and it was absolutely blowing a gale when he did this painting. He made his first paintings in December 1881 under supervision of Anton Moore, the husband of Van Gogh's cousin. The work was made in Van Gogh's second attempt at painting in August 1882. The painting shows the beach at Scheveningen on the North Sea coast, a few miles from The Hague, on a stormy day on 21st or 22nd of August. The painting was made quickly, outside on an easel at the beach, with the wind whipping up sand and nearly blowing Van Gogh off his feet. He managed to scrape most of the wind-blown sand off the thick, wet painting, but some remains. The painting is an impressionist take on the grey-tinged seascapes of the Hague School paintings. And it's broken into 3 horizontal lines: the threatening sky, and with the dark rolling clouds, the greenish-grey sea with lines of white-capped waves crashing onto the shore, and the beach and sand dunes in browns, oranges, yellows and greens. A number of people are on the beach, some fishwives in their white bonnets, watching as a group of men with horses and a cart are about to pull on a rope attached to a waiting fishing boat to bring it safely ashore. The people are suggested by a few economical brushstrokes, and the breakers by thick lines of paint applied directly from the tube, because of course tubes of paint were available now, and he just squirted it straight on, which was, unheard of to be doing that. And apparently it took days for some of his paintings to dry because of how thick the paint was. So anyway, that's that one, which is quite a painting, isn't it, for an early piece. Then we go on to some boats here, and it says, "This is fishing boats on the beach. Intricate piece of drawing, great draftsmanship." He extracts the essence of the subject, and he says about it, I'll just have to take this off because I've got bits here all over the place. He wrote to Theo about this painting. "I'm giving myself up to the intoxication of work. It sometimes takes me over, and I let myself go on and on and on. No one can study Japanese art, I think, without becoming more cheerful and happy." This was in September 1858. "When I leave, very early in the morning, I do a drawing of the boats and start the picture, canvas size 30. On the beach, very flat, sandy little boats of green, red and blue. They make you think of flowers. After some time, your way of seeing changes when you see colours with a Japanese eye, with a long stay here." He must have gone on to say something else, which I haven't got there. But anyway, there's the painting of the boats. Then he was influenced by this particular painting, which is Blessing Before Supper, Charles Le Gros, Graux, 1861. And from this came the inspiration for this particular painting, which is a very famous painting of his. His first major work, you might say, The Potato Eaters. Now, there are people who just don't take to this painting at all, but Vincent was extremely proud of this painting. He was very admiring of the plain, simple folk, the farmers, and the people that lived off the land. And here they are having a meal of potatoes that they've grown, and he was fascinated by that. He spent a lot of time doing individual studies in preparation for this painting. During March and the beginning of April 1885, he sketched studies for the painting and corresponded with his brother Theo, who was not impressed with his current work or the sketches. He worked on the painting from April 13 until the beginning of May, when it was mostly done except for minor changes, which he made with small brush strokes later the same year. Vincent said he wanted to depict peasants as they really were. He deliberately chose coarse and ugly models, thinking that they would be natural and unspoiled in his finished work. You see, I really have wanted to make it so that people get the idea that these folk, who are eating their potatoes by the light of their little lamp, have tilled the earth themselves with these hands they are putting in the dish, so it speaks of manual labour, and that they have thus honestly earned their food. I wanted it to give the idea of a wholly different way of life from ours, civilized people. So I certainly don't want everyone to just admire it or approve of it without knowing why. And then there's something else he said here. He said to his sister Wilhelmina, I think about my own work is that the painting of peasants eating potatoes is the best thing I did. However, the work was criticised by his friend Anton van Rappaer. Soon after it was painted, it was a blow to Van Gogh, or Van Gogh. I call him Van Gogh because that's how we learned that name, but I know that he's called Van Gogh as well, so it's probably safer to say Vincent, but I'll probably say all sorts. It was a blow to Van Gogh's confidence as an emerging artist, and he wrote back to his friend, "You had no right to condemn my work in the way you did. I am always doing what I can't do yet in order to learn how to do it." So anyway, yes, and then he mentions de Groot's work. It's a solemn depiction of a peasant family saying grace before supper. The painting was closely linked with Christian representations of the Last Supper. Vincent's Potato Eaters was inspired by this work, and several similar religious connotations can be identified in Vincent's work. Then there's just a little bit from a letter to Theo about the Potato Eaters. I would be wrong, I think, to give a peasant picture a certain conventional smoothness. If a peasant picture smells of bacon, smoke, potato steam, well, that's not unhealthy. Vincent had a great affection for peasants and saw them as the salt of the earth people. He felt that these were the real people, close to nature, tilling the soil, and contrasted sharply with the bourgeois of the city. He paints in a crude style, almost caricatures of the people. Now, he made lots of studies, and he wanted it to be exhibited, but it was a non-starter for Parisian tastes, so it stayed in the family. So, there we are. So, but you'll notice it's that muted, dark sort of palette still of the Dutch masters, that kind of palette. So that was the Potato Eaters. And then he followed up with this one called The Cottage. And the family of the Potato Eaters actually lived in this cottage. It was divided in two. And there's a little light there from the fire in there. Now this is a more accomplished picture, apparently, according to the experts anyway. Home of two families, one of which was the de Groots, who were the subjects of the Potato Eaters. Now I'll just read you this little bit that I've got here, while you have a look at it. The Cottage, 1885, painted after the Potato Eaters, more focused on the subject, a peasant subject. It has a cottage, a lady, and some trees, but it is not picturesque in any way. It is a grim and bleak one. The interior looks dark and stuffy and smoky. Vincent did not idealize the country life of peasants. The harsh conditions is showed on their faces. Well, not in this, of course, you can't see their faces, but we know what the person means. He dressed as a peasant in his parents' middle-class home. For my parents, I am like a scruffy dog in the house. That's what he said. The old cottage beneath the red evening sky presents, and this person says, an idyllic picture of rural life. So obviously opinions differ as to what Vincent is showing here. Vincent called these humble farmhouses people's nests. He felt they had a sheltering quality, and so on and so forth. So there you are. That's that one, the cottage. My goodness, this is going to be long. I'm already up to 41 minutes. I was hoping to go a bit faster than this. But anyway, there's a photograph of Vincent there, and later on in life. And it does say that Vincent was an inventor of the selfie, because he did so many self-portraits, and that was because he couldn't get anyone to pose for him, because he couldn't pay them. And the villagers, wherever he used to be, you know, through his wanderings, a lot of them used to poke fun at him, and he didn't react too well to that, and probably people stayed away from him, you know. But in any case, you can see the brush strokes there and how he was a master of the palette there. It's coming through, because when he went to Paris to stay with his brother, he was introduced to all these colours that you could squirt out of a tube, and bright colours that hadn't been seen before. And of course it was giddying for him. He started to realise what he could do with them. Here's another one of his self-portraits. And here's one that's where he's obviously been influenced by the pointillism of Seurat, because the science of colour was very big at the time. You know, they were discovering all sorts of properties of colour and what you could do with it, and lying different colours next to each other and how the eye would perceive that. So, you know, it was all very exciting. Now this one is called The Courtesan, and it shows his Japanese influence, and there is preparatory drawings of this, and he's got it all gridded out before he paints it. Now this type of art was so different to European art. It was simple, direct, it was clear. He took the central part from a Paris magazine cover and reproduced it. He made a tracing of the head, and he put the flat print of the courtesan against his own background. Now there are bamboo, lily pads and a frog in the background, and lily pads and a crane, and a frog and a crane, for the French anyway, were common slang words for prostitutes. So he based it on a woodcut by Japanese artist Kasai Eisen, and that was the print that was on the cover of the magazine in Paris. And he used a grid to copy and enlarge the Japanese figure, used bright colours and bold outlines, and of course that was the Japanese influence, the bold outlines of figures. We can tell the woman is a courtesan by her hairstyle and the belt, which was called an obi, that she is wearing, which is tied at the front of her kimono rather than at the back. Van Gogh framed her with a pond full of water lilies. Okay, so that's that one. And then he decided, after being in Paris for a couple of years, that he basically had enough of the nightlife in Paris. And I just wanted to show you this picture here of a painting that he did in Paris. They must have gone out for the evening. And I think that, to me, it looks very claustrophobic. It doesn't look to me as though he found that fun at all. I think it looks to me as though he was thinking, I want to get out of here. So I just thought I'd show you that at this moment. So he decided to go to Arles, A-R-L-E-S, to that region, to practice his painting and to just get out of Paris and smell the fresh air and everything. And he just loved the sun on his back. He loved light. He loved yellow. He was particularly fond of yellow. And the new paints that were coming out had really good colours, you know, the yellows and everything. They've never been seen before at that quality. So anyway, here he is. This is the picture of irises. A view of Arles with irises in the foreground, 1888, oil on canvas. And he said, this is a letter he sent to Theo. All you can see of the town are a few red roofs and a tower. And you can see the red roofs there and the tower. And he says, the rest is hidden by the green leaves and the fig trees. That's right in the background, and a narrow strip of sky above it, surrounded by vast meadows of flowers with countless spots of gold, a yellow sea. In the foreground, a ditch runs across the meadow with purple irises. In the background, the lovely little town with its pretty women. And here are the irises in the foreground there. So that's that one. And here's a picture of him going along with his canvas there. He had a little fold-up stool and his painting requirements. In Provence, the thing that strikes me here and makes the place more attractive to me is the transparency of the air. The line of the horizon is sharp, far into the distance, with a recognizable shape. This gives a sense of space and sky. I am in a frenzy of work because the trees are in flower. He worked on many different orchards. And the thing is, he was such a prolific painter and so fast. He painted up to 3 canvases a week. He just used to belt them out, you know. It was just really quite remarkable. And of course, here's an example. This will give you an idea of the effect it had on him to get out there into the nature with the blue skies and everything. It just excited him beyond all belief. He spoke about the transparency of the atmosphere in Provence, that you could see clearly for miles. He said that the limpid climate was how he imagined Japan to be. He felt life there was the happiest place than anywhere else in the world. And he loved how the sunflowers always turned to face the sun. Just amazing. Right. Now, what do we have here? Oh, now, there are those who say that Van Gogh was the world's first colorist. And a colorist is characterized by the use of intense color, which becomes the dominant feature of the resultant work of art. A picture of a colorist photo. Here is a picture. This is to give you an idea of what I mean. Now, they have colorists today, of course, in, excuse me a moment, one of my pieces has gone down. You notice I have the orange there. That's for him as well. Anyway, in films and all that sort of thing, the colorist does their magic so that, you know, when you see a movie and it seems almost surreal in a way, well, not surreal, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, you know, they say things are in like a technicolor. It's so pure in its lighting and its colour. Anyway, this will probably show you better than me waffling on. That's before a colourist has done their work, and that's afterwards. You can see there's a change in the dimension and everything, in the depth. The whole thing is a lot different. And then there's another picture, and I must at this point thank my husband very much for all the hard work he's done on this. I think he absolutely lost himself in Vincent. That's why it's going so long, because he is very thorough in what he does. And here's another one, an example of what a colorist can do with a photograph. It just brings everything up clear and bold. And basically, that's exactly what Vincent did. And we'll get to that very shortly. He says, this is something that Vincent said, sometimes I long so much to do a landscape, just as one would go for a long walk to refresh oneself. And in all of nature, in trees, for instance, I see expression and a soul. And then he says, the uglier and older, meaner, iller, poorer I get, the more I wish to take out my revenge by doing brilliant colour, well arranged and resplendent. I'm in a fury of work as the trees are in blossom, and I wanted to do a Provence orchard of tremendous gaiety. The artist Hockney said of him, he was a miserable man in a way, but when he was painting he wasn't, and that's what he loved to do. And there's love in those paintings, isn't there? Can't read my writing there. Oh, that's right. He says, that's not misery, it's love. And that's true. I mean, you look at his paintings, and they're certainly not, I mean, he might have been cranky and a bit out of sorts with different, he was probably hungry half the time. Of course he's going to be cranky and out of sorts. But his paintings certainly didn't reflect his mood in that way. He was intuitively brilliant as a colorist. He read color theory, and he was instinctive because he studied color as well. Now then, that's about another painting. Now here we are. This is another one that is considered to be a masterpiece by the art world. Now, I'll just get my information. See, I've pinned the information to each picture. That's why I'm moving things about so much in the background here. Now, The Harvest, this is called, at La Croix, with Montmayor in the background, 1888. This is like a Tour de France. You're going all over the place. Van Gogh loved this region of Provence with the rocky outcrop of the mountains. This was thought to be one of the happiest times of his troubled life. For a short period he seemed very content with his way of life. He made many pen and ink sketches of the Benedictine Abbey and the spectacular views from it of the surrounding area. He spent much time producing sketches with his reed pen and rather less time painting. Well, the sketches were cheaper than painting, so I suppose he did a lot of that in preparation for the costly painting. Painting the, yes, that's just what I said, oh yes, and also it was almost impossible to paint when the Mistral wind was in full strength, because it's a very windy area apparently. In a letter which he wrote to his brother Theo in January 1888, he described the pleasure he derived from this area, despite the problem with mosquitoes and the strong cold northerly Mistral wind, which made his canvases shake on the easel and made painting outside almost impossible. He wrote, "But now I've been here 50 times to see the view over the plain. If a view can make one forget such small displeasures, then it must have something." In this painting, the pride of place does not go to the abbey, which can be seen in the background. The painting is all about yellow and green patchwork quilt fields, which lay between Montmayor and Arles. The fields are interspersed with small farm buildings with their red-top roofs, the colour of which not only acts as a contrast, but seems to enhance the colour of the surrounding fields. In the middle ground we can see a blue cart, which is often cited as a secondary title to the painting. He painted the scene in June 1888, and he believed it to be his best work to date. It was at a time when the summer heat was beginning to intensify, and the life-restoring radiance of the Mediterranean sun was his constant companion. He once described this light in a letter to his brother, a light that, for want of a better word, I shall call yellow, pale sulphur yellow, pale golden citron. How lovely yellow is, and how much better I shall see the north. So, because he wanted to go north. And then I've just got here, The Harvest is one of the most important paintings which he felt was very important himself. He has confidence in this painting, a kind of assurance in his style. He knows what he wants to paint, the cycles of nature in a theme that recurs. Religion and Christianity is replaced by nature. Something up there is how he spoke about divinity. Birth, regrowth, renewal, and death. He was proud of it. It has breadth and depth across the plane. He leads the eye through the composition. And, it does lead the eye through, doesn't it? From here onwards to the cart, they were talking about the plains, right through to the mountains and the sky. So that's that one. Now I'm just going to give you a little taste of some more here before we go through because Vincent had a very short life, as you know, or as you probably know anyway. But he didn't start painting until he was 27, and he died about 10 years later. So he stuffed an awful lot of painting in that time. A lot of it was in the last 2 years. So this is Sorrowing Old Man at Eternity Gate, 1890. It was based on a pencil drawing called Worn Out of a pensioner and war veteran, Adrianus Zuiderland, at an almshouse in The Hague. And I sort of tend to wonder whether he saw himself a bit in that picture too, in his moments in his little room there in the evenings when he was just despairing of where his next money to pay the rent or whatever was coming from. Then we have a view of the Church of Auvers, Auvers, on a river Oise. I have a larger picture of the village church, an effect in which the building appears to be violet-hued against a sky of simple deep blue colour, pure cobalt. The stained glass windows appear as ultramarine blotches. The roof is violet and partly orange. In the foreground, some green plants in bloom and sand with a pink glow of sunshine in it. That's how he described that in a letter. Daubigny's Garden, Daubignys Garden. He was an artist, and this was his enclosed garden, painted 3 times. It depicts the enclosed garden of Charles Francois de Borny, or however you say that, a painter who was greatly admired by Vincent. So that's been immortalised. Then olives, the olive grove. Saint Remy, Saint Remy, Remy, de Provence in France. Vincent painted at least 15 paintings of olive trees in Saint Remy. They had a special symbolic meaning for him. They represented life, the divine, and the cycle of life. He had a love of nature which helped to calm and centre him. And of course there are olive trees in the Garden of Gethsemane, which may well have been one of his influences there. Now this one here, Portrait of Madame Ginaux, Ginaux, 1888 to 1889, according to which one, because there were quite a few paintings of the same subject with different backgrounds and everything. It means literally the woman from Arles. She was the proprietress of a cafe wearing regional costume. He said that the first version of the portrait he knocked off in an hour. And there are some books there. He was very interested in literature and everything, and he could speak different languages, French and Dutch and English. Still Life of Shoes, 1886, oil on canvas, a symbol of the nobility of hard work here. And apparently with these boots or shoes, they didn't look quite hardened enough or battered enough, so he wore them for about a week or so to make them look a bit older. But I mean, that's a fabulous study, isn't it? Now then, family dynamics. Vincent's living was up to Theo prior to his father's death, and possibly the father sort of helped a little bit before he died anyway, just quietly. The rest of the siblings may have been approached for money, and basically they may well have said to Theo, look, you talked him into doing art, so, you know, it's on your head to keep providing him with money. Maybe, just maybe, Theo was not quite as understanding as he may have been. There's no doubt that Theo loved his brother, but he was also a businessman. And this is some of my ideas here. Yes, he only ever sold one of his paintings. It was The Red Harvest, I think it was. And that was bought by a fellow artist, a female artist. So in his lifetime, he only saw that was one painting. Subconsciously, Theo's attitude may have leaked out to his brother, and Vincent was feeling a burden, lonely and depressed. He was feeling that he was no use to anyone, and maybe they decided it would be best for his brother and his family if he relieved them of the financial strain of his upkeep. Well, I should imagine, you know, that it was a family, you know, like, I mean, you love your brothers, you love your sisters and all that sort of thing, but I mean, if it fell to you to be supporting someone that, you know, you had to live your own life, and Theo ended up getting married, and he was having a bit of trouble with the dealership. He was going to go out and start a business of his own. So I think there was a lot of financial strain towards the end of Vincent's life that basically came to a head. I think that's probably what happened, but we'll get to that soon. So anyway, Vincent decided that he was going to live in this yellow house in Arles, and his dream, as I've said before, was to get all these artists together, live together and create works of art, which was great in theory, but in practice, putting a whole bunch of artists together in one area is probably a recipe for disaster anyway, regardless of who you are. But anyway, there's the yellow house, and that's the painting that Vincent painted of it. And it was, some information here. The house was the right wing of number 2 place, Lamartine Arles in France, where on May the 1st, 1888, Van Gogh rented 4 rooms. He occupied 2 large ones on the ground floor to serve as the workshop and kitchen, and on the first floor 2 smaller ones. Paul Gauguin lived for 9 weeks there, and so on and so forth. Yes, I better not go too much into all this because it's dragging on here. But anyway, it has been described as a portrait of a house. This is where he wanted to set up the studio of the South. The sky is like a night sky, and yet the yellow is so bright like daylight. So that's his little yellow house. And then he decided to paint his picture of his bedroom and send that off to Theo. And he did it, well, he didn't send the painting off, but he showed him a drawing of the painting, and that's his drawing there. And here is a charming picture of his room at Arles. He's got his little pictures on the wall there. And it says, he said, I have rented his studio, a whole house with 4 rooms, 180 francs a year. The outside is painted yellow, the inside is whitewashed and full of sun. At last I'll see my paintings in a really light room. Now I have to go and sleep there. Today I shall buy a mat and a mattress and a blanket. I also have 40 francs to pay at the hotel, so I won't have much left. Let's see the rest of this. Oh, as long as the paintings are worth what they cost. If the Impressionists come up, which they may well do, and after a few years of work we might make up for the past, and after a year I might have a home, peace. And Theo wrote to Vincent, and Theo paid Gauguin's expenses to get there, I might add. So Gauguin's coming. That will make a great change in your life. I hope that your efforts will succeed in making your house a place where artists will feel at home. And I mean, there's a little note, isn't there, of hope in there. Hope triumphing over reason, most likely. And he must have suspected that things wouldn't really go too well for Vincent. But he's always encouraging in his letters to him. And then Vincent decided that a very good idea, when he heard that Gauguin was coming, was that he would paint some sunflowers to go in Gauguin's room in preparation for his arrival. So here is one of the famous versions of his sunflowers. This is 1888, this one. Sunflower series, total of 12 painted, most common are 7 painted in Arles in 1888 to 1899. The other 5 he had painted previously while in Paris in 1887. So anyway, oh, and I'll just show you this too. There was a building opposite the Yellow House, and that was the building. And here is the building with how Vincent painted it. The colorist emphasizing the building. Very good. So anyway, now what do I just find? Yes, so he was painting. Here's some of the paintings that he did when he was at the Yellow House. Now I don't know if this was before Gauguin arrived or afterwards, or when they were getting on okay, but it says here, Café Terrace at night, 1888, also called the Café Terrace on the Place du Forum in the evening. So that's a very famous one. I mean, I've got a jigsaw puzzle that is this very picture. Now he says, I feel I have to exaggerate the colour even more. And he says, after some time, your way of seeing changes. You see with more of a Japanese eye. You see colours differently. With a long stay here in Arles, I will bring out my own personality. For 3 nights running, I have sat up painting and going to bed during the day. The second picture of the week, shows the outside of a cafe with the terrace lit by a large gas light in the blue night, with a corner of the starry sky. On the terrace there are small figures of drinkers. Painting there at night amuses me greatly. So, there's that. And here is a picture of modern day, and his picture next to it. So he did say with his colours, if I remember rightly, that it's quite true that this is painting at night, that I may take a blue for a green in the dark, a blue lilac for a pink lilac. since you can't make out the nature of the tone clearly, but it's the only way of getting away from the conventional black night with a poor, pallid and whitish light, while in fact a mere candle by itself gives us the richest yellows and oranges. So it sounds like you really enjoyed painting at night. Now, this is where Gauguin and Vincent have a bit of an altercation. And from there on, things didn't go well for Vincent. Now, I've just got here a picture. Here's the two chairs, Gauguin's chair and Vincent's chair. What does it say here? In the late 1888, early signs of mental illness began to emerge, and Van Gogh suffered epileptic seizures, psychotic attacks and delusions. During one of these, anyway, they had an altercation, Vincent and Gauguin. They fundamentally differed in their styles of painting and what they saw in painting, because Gauguin was one that said you can paint from the imagination, you don't have to have your subject in front of you, whereas Vincent was saying no, you must have your subject in front of you and you paint that as you see it. And there were other fundamental differences between the two. And I think Vincent just got very upset one night, and he ended up following Gauguin along the road, and he had a razor in his hand. And, there are various versions of it, but at the end of the day, Vincent cut part of the earlobe off his left ear. And, of course, it was bleeding profusely and everything. But he did give the piece to a lady of the night. Apparently he wrapped it up and gave it to her as a present. And I think he went to the hospital because he was bleeding and everything, had that looked at, and I think he realised that things, he was deteriorating mentally. So he admitted himself to an asylum for treatment. And Gauguin telegraphed Vincent's brother and told him what had happened, and then he took off, and that was the last that they saw of each other. Yes, it just says Gauguin went into town to get something to eat, and Vincent followed him brandishing a razor blade. Gauguin checked into a hotel and returned the next day to the Yellow House to get his things, and then took off. So that was that. Excuse me. Oh, there's a picture that Gauguin did of Vincent painting sunflowers, and as you can see, he's got the sunflowers right in front of him that he's painting. Right, so now we go to Vincent's time in the asylum, and here's a painting that Vincent put together. As you can see, there are the nuns there and the patients in there around the fire. Ward in the hospital in Saint-Remy, April 1889. Apparently, while he was there, Vincent painted one of the doctors, and the doctor wouldn't accept the painting. He didn't like it. Now, Vincent admitted himself to the psychiatric hospital and St. Paul de Moselle in Saint-Remy in May, as he was concerned about his own state of mind. Appreciation in the letter, but how much of this was cheer up? Oh yeah, no. Theo wrote to Vincent. He submitted 10 paintings to the Salon of Independent, the independent displays they had there, rather than the official salon. He put 10 paintings in there. How pleased I would have been if you'd been there at the independent exhibition. Your paintings are well placed and look very well. Many people came up to ask me to give you their compliments, but no one offered to buy, though. I think a certain amount of that was T.O. saying, people thought your paintings were pretty good. I mean, number one, it was polite society, so it could well have been that these Parisians and various other people who came to have a look at these paintings, they knew that T.O. was Vincent's brother, so they're going to be polite. And also, T.O. would have wanted to say something nice to his brother to make him feel a bit better about things. Because in retrospect, you can think, oh, what were they? They were crazy. They should have, recognized what a brilliant genius was before them with his paintings. But of course, in those days, people thought people painted like that because they couldn't paint properly. They couldn't paint a picture that looked like a picture, so they, put a whole lot of brushstrokes on there and called it art. It outraged a lot of people. They felt insulted by these works, and that includes the Impressionists to begin with. People just couldn't understand any of it. And of course, Vincent was even further. He was heading towards the next stage of art, which was expressionism, where the artist, painted what was in their mind and what they were trying to convey to you, and you had to, look at a painting and work out what the artist was trying to say to you. And Vincent was a forerunner of that new movement in art. But anyway, so to get through, what else have we got here? In addition to Dutch and French books, Van Gogh admired and reread English language authors all his adult life. He loved Shakespeare, whom he would clutch as a lifeline from despair at the asylum that he was in, and novels of George Eliot. And George Eliot wasn't a man, by the way. She wrote under the name. In those days, women tended to write under men's names. Mary Ann Evans was her name. And Harriet Beecher Stowe and Charles Dickens. My whole life, proclaimed a letter from 1882, is aimed at making the things from everyday life that Dickens describes. Of course, Dickens was a champion of the poor and the needy. So anyway, so that was that. And then we go on to another famous picture that's really quite haunting, and that's of this one. Now, this is actually from this etching here, Newgate Exercise Yard by Gustave Dore, D-O-R-E, from 1872. But Vincent identified very much with this painting when he was behind the walls in that asylum, because he couldn't go out. They let him paint, and to begin with he painted inside, and then he was allowed outside to paint. But for quite a while he couldn't do that. So he painted this one, and some people say that this one is him looking directly out. But it certainly gives that claustrophobic feeling, doesn't it? So that's that one. Prisoners Exercising After Gustave Dore was painted in 1890 by Vincent van Gogh, toward the end of his time in the asylum. As Vincent regained his strength, he wanted to leave the asylum, and so on and so forth. So he felt that if he could convince them that he was painting well, that they would think that he was well again, and they would let him out. And basically they let him out because hang on, wait till I think of his name. Pissarro, one of Vincent's friends, Camille Pissarro, he was a very caring man, and he suggested that Vincent go into the care of another physician, which he did do that. He was allowed out under his care, and that's towards the end of his life there. Now, through the bars of the hospital, Vincent could see this man here, the Reaper. and he's reaping the wheat there. After his breakdown, he was in the asylum. Wheat field with a reaper was painted from the window of the asylum, and it had bars on it, but he was managed to paint it without the bars. He painted this scene right through the seasons, from when the wheat was sowed through to the harvest. He saw the reaper as death, the life cycle of nature. After his breakdown in Arles, he changes in his colour palette. The painting is flooded in yellow, and he has created movement in the wheat. Yeah, that's basically the same thing. And he says, this is what Vincent said to Theo in a letter: I am living the image of death, in the sense that humanity is the wheat that is cut, but there is nothing sad in this death. It happens in the light, with the sun flooding everything with a fine gold light. I feel so strongly that the story of people is like the story of wheat. If we are not sown in the earth to sprout there, what does it matter? We are ground to make bread. There's Starry Night, which he also painted when he was in the asylum. It is in the Museum of Modern Art, New York City. Oil on canvas. Post-Impressionist canvas painted June 1889. It depicts the view from the east-facing window of the asylum room just before sunrise, and he added an idealized village. So there's the famous Starry Night, and the cypress there. Now, Theo got married, and he had a young wife and a young child. And this is where Vincent felt very, very much a burden, and where he started to think that he should take this burden away from his brother. Now, Vincent writes to Theo when he finds out that the baby has been born. He says, "How glad I was when the news came. I should have greatly preferred him to call the boy after father, of whom I have been thinking so much these days, instead of after me. But seeing it has now been done, I started right away to make a picture for him, to hang in their bedroom, big branches of white almond blossom against a blue sky." Now, I'm not sure, I don't think that letter must have been to Theo, because he said, I greatly preferred him to call the boy after father, so I don't know who this letter is to. The bright colour is reflective of the paintings made in Arles, and here is the picture that he painted for his godson and nephew and namesake. And it's got the Japanese touch about it too, hasn't it? Lovely, beautiful piece of work. The Blossom painting, 1890, Baby Vincent. This painting in honour of his nephew. In this time of uncertainty, Ria's mental health, his finances, his brother's finances, he still painted a blossom painting of the celebration of the birth of this child. Yeah. So Vincent left the asylum in May 1890, and we're getting towards the end of his life now. And he travelled to the artist village of Auvres, Auvres, sur Oise, O-I-S-E, near Paris. He stopped off on the way to visit Theo and Joe and his new nephew, Vincent Willem. Joe said in a letter, "Then Theo drew him into the room where the little boy's cradle was. He had been named after Vincent. Silently, the two brothers looked at the quietly sleeping baby. Both had tears in their eyes." Oh, so Now this painting is often said to be the last one that Vincent painted before he committed suicide. But there are those who say that's not correct, that he did paint others. But I think people just see these black crows flapping off into the distance, you know, as though they've been startled by something. And these paths that seemingly go nowhere, they see it as highly symbolic, and the dark clouds and everything. Wheatfield with Crows is what this one called, and it's one of his most famous paintings. Vincent did want his wheat fields under stormy skies to express sadness and extreme loneliness, but at the same time he wanted to show what he considered healthy and fortifying about the countryside. He used powerful colour combinations in this painting. The blue sky contrasts with the yellow-orange wheat, while the red of the path is intensified by the green bands of grass. Well, I mean, these prints, they're probably nothing like the, you know, the true colours, really. He says, there are vast fields of wheat under troubled skies, and I did not have to go out of my way to try to express sadness and extreme loneliness. There is lots of movement from the crows, colour of corn with sunlight, loneliness and sorrow. Yeah, I've just put a few little scrawlings in there of my own. So here is the place where Vincent had his room. It was near the top. It was a little garret up there. Vincent arrived here on May 20, 1890. He had seen Dr. Gachet. That was the fellow that Pizarro had suggested that Vincent go and go under his care. He sort of used a combination of treatments for Vincent, but of course there were no drugs to help in those days. They used to, when they went to the asylum, they put them in cold baths and things, and apparently Vincent didn't mind them. He thought they helped him. But anyway, Vincent thought it was too much and found this one. Oh, that's right. He had seen Dr. Gachet, who recommended an inn that was 6 francs a day. But Vincent thought it was too much and found this one. Notice the table and 2 chairs. And then here's an original picture. And this person in the doorway gives an account of what happened when Vincent came back from the field where he shot himself. And Vincent did do her picture, Adeline. She didn't much like it. In 1988, some collector did and paid nearly $15 million for it at an auction. There's his picture of her. She might have been sitting in one of his chairs. He might have taken it with him when he left the yellow house. He might have brought it with him. Here's the picture of what they say Vincent saw as he was coming home. He shot himself in the field, but he didn't die. He managed to make it back to his room, and he looked out. Apparently he paused there before he went on up, but I'm not sure that that would be correct, because I think it was dark when he got back, but who knows what really did happen. Now, the final chapter. According to Adeline Roux, that was the picture I just showed you, there was some controversy, but I'm going by the primary source here. The innkeeper's daughter. On July 27th, Vincent left the inn after breakfast. When he had not returned by dusk, as he regularly did, the family became worried. He returned around 9 p.m, holding his stomach. Adeline's mother asked him if there was a problem, and he answered, "No, but I have," and he didn't continue, and he climbed the stairs up to his room. Her father thought that he could hear groans and found him curled up in his bed. When he was asked if he was ill, Vincent showed him a wound near his heart, saying, "I tried to kill myself." During the night, he said he had set out for the wheat field where he had recently been painting. During the afternoon, he had shot himself with a revolver and passed out. Revived by the coolness of the evening, he tried in vain, to find the revolver to complete the act. He then returned to the inn. Her father sent for a physician. The gendarmes came to ask questions about his attempted suicide, to which he responded, "My body is mine, and I am free to do what I want with it. Do not accuse anybody. It is I that wish to commit suicide." Adeline's father went to the telegraph office as soon as it opened and sent a telegram to Tio. Tio arrived by train that afternoon. Vincent lapsed into a coma and died around 1 a.m. in the morning. Tio wrote to his sister, Elizabeth. He himself wanted to die. When I sat at his bedside and said we would try to get him better, he said that we hoped that he would be spared this kind of despair. He said, "The sadness will last forever." I understood what he wanted to say with those words. Now, Emile Bernard was a friend of Vincent's, and they had studied art together. He was 15 years younger, and this is his account of what happened next. He says in a letter, "Our dear friend Vincent died 4 days ago. I think you will already have guessed that he killed himself. He went into the fields and placed his easel against the haystack, then shot himself with a revolver. On the walls of the room where the body lay, all his last canvases were nailed, forming something like a halo around him, and making his death, through the brilliance and genius that shone from the paintings, even more deplorable. On the coffin were masses of flowers, sunflowers, yellow flowers which he loved so much, a symbol of that light of which he dreamt, in hearts as well as in paintings. Near him also his easel, his folding stool, and his brushes were placed on the floor by the coffin. Dr. Gachet tried to say a few words, but he wept too much, and could only stammer a confused farewell, and then he went back. Tio was completely broken by his grief. Now, just these last few bits here. Now, I'm just on the conclusion here. Now, Vincent's brother, Tio, only lived 6 months after him, and he died. He had respiratory problems and this and that. So that was pretty sad as well. So I've just got these last bits here. Vincent tended to be a bit extreme sometimes. His clothes, how he dressed and everything. His religious zeal went to the extreme. Now, the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, 1788 to 1860, said, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." And that's Vincent van Gogh, Maestro of the brush. And it turned out that Tio ended up being interred next to Vincent. And here is where they repose. Tio originally was buried somewhere else, but I think it was in 1914 his remains were placed next to Vincent. And apparently this cemetery is up a hill. You have to walk up a hill, and look at the sunflowers there. So that they're in repose together. And that is Vincent. I mean, there are bits I was going to go through a book as well, but we're already, heading towards unknown charters. I've never charted waters this long. So I think I shall call it to a close there. And I wish everybody all the best until we meet again. So goodbye from Mary Rose.